So this is model building in InfraWorks with ArcGIS. There have been a lot of talks about this topic, so I don't know if we're going to overlap. If you really feel we are overlapping and being redundant, you know, we won't be upset if you leave. I will tell you, though, that Dan Campbell from City of Vancouver, whom I'll introduce in a minute, his presentation of real Vancouver data with this is really interesting. So, and it's a really customer-focused, motivated talk about why it's important for the City of Vancouver. I'd like to get your feedback afterwards, maybe on what other things you've seen and how this one compares, and what other information you would like to get about this pretty exciting new product. So I'm Stephen Brockwell. I worked for Autodesk for about 9 years, starting in 1999, and then I started my own little company, Brockwell IT, and I've been working a lot with Autodesk customers, some of whom are in the room, and with Autodesk themselves, and even doing work for Esri Inc. We're system integrators more than anything else, and we put things together. So we actually did a lot of the software engineering work on the ArcGIS connector itself. So that's a component that we built with Autodesk on their team, and it was a really exciting project. And it's, as I'll say later, it's a beginning, not an end. Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dan Campbell. I'm with the City of Vancouver. My background is architecture, planning, urban design, and somehow I've ended up in IT, and now I'm a GIS person. I'm still trying to come to terms with that, but I will accept it. And but I think that having this kind of background and sort of meshes well with this whole kind of concept of sharing data between GIS and BIM and CAD and that kind of integration.
Okay, excellent. So what we're going to do is give you an overview of the offering, because I don't know whether that's been explained to you. You know, if you want to try it out but not go full purchase, what does that mean? If you already have ArcGIS Online, but you have new Autodesk users that are not using it and they're on, things, we'll talk about that. I'm going to give you a brief tour of ArcGIS Online, because it's important that you have an understanding of how you use that. You don't want to just go into InfraWorks and sort of start using InfraWorks and trying to pull data in. You really want to use it as a tool to manage some of your kind of GIS assets that are going to be pulled into InfraWorks. Now I'll talk about how to consume the data a little bit in InfraWorks, and then why it's important too. That's a really, why do this, right? We could get files, we can do this, I'll talk about that. And then finally, Dan will do quite a bit longer presentation on really sort of full use case for using it with the City of Vancouver's data in a really rich model. So with that, so why do this? Why is this important for end users? And it's more than just, I think in many ways, a marketing thing and part of the strategic alliance between the two companies. Where are my files, right? That's one of the things, like where did I put those shape files I had to use? Frank, do you have them? Where do I get them? Are they up to date, right? How do you guarantee vintage currency? And I don't need the entire city, so, do I really need to carry around this huge file? Imagery, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and we can have a sort of offline conversation about it, because there's some things that have to evolve a little bit for imagery to be supported really, really well. If you have an image server, it is, but I'll talk about that later. But I mean, if you've got the City of Vancouver, their imagery file is 4 gig. Do I need the whole thing? Obviously, I do if I'm kind of building it from a file. Or I have to go download just the segments that I need from City of Vancouver. They have tiles. So, they have maybe 40 or 50 smaller files. I have to go get the ones I need and pull them down. Or I'm dealing with a 4 gig image file. So don't do that, right? With this solution, you can just grab what you need when you need it and know that it's up to date. You can even know the provenance of it, where it came from, and the vintage, so on. So you go filter it, and it automatically clips it for your model so that you can bring it in. And as you'll see with Dan's work, you can refresh them. The layers that you pull into your model can be refreshed later. So if someone does an update, you just have to refresh that. And imagine if you had to really do that with a file with InfraWorks, it would be really tough. All right. You know, the other department has that data. With ArcGIS Online, you know, this is one of the team that runs your ArcGIS site already is using this data, and they're the ones you have to collaborate with. Well, now you don't have to collaborate with anybody. You don't have to talk to anybody to get the data. You just go get it, and you know it's proven, you know, approved and certified and ready to go. Because it's a conversation you might have. Yeah, would you mind sharing that? And they just publish it, or they, you know, give you access to it by sharing it with you. Either way. This is a journey, so there's some things that aren't perfect. Raster imagery is the one that I think needs the most work right now. It works, but it has to work a little bit better, and that I'm sure will be happening in the near future. You know, you have a lot of input on this. Many of you are probably, how many people are members of the Sandbox community for InfraWorks? Excellent. So in the Sandbox, it's there. You can try it out if you have your own portal, and or you can just use ArcGIS Online if you want. And you know, let us know, and let you know Ramesh and the product managers know how it's working for you and what we could do to make it better. Okay. So the offer, I don't know how many of you understand like exactly what's happening with the offer for those who may not have it. How many here do not currently have ArcGIS Online? Okay, it's a large number. That's great. That's good. This is really for you. So, you know, you get a site with it that I'll briefly introduce you to. And if you're an AEC collection customer or an Autodesk EBA customer, you can get this for the number of users that you have. You get what are called level 2 users. Level 1 user is just someone who can query, okay? Level 2 is actually someone who can update. So, you know, you can see the direction where that's going. You're going to be able to push data up. You're going to be able to use the data in a really rich way. And for a year's time, you have the ability to use that service and test it on your own data and to see if it works for you. If you're already an ArcGIS customer, you can just use this as it is now. But if you have AEC users who are not, you know, who are not currently level 2 named users on your ArcGIS account, you can add them to this through this program. And it expires in about a year if it works for you. And yeah. Oh yeah, this is the offer, you know, like this is the offer. If you already have an ArcGIS account, you can just use it, you know. But the offer can allow you to extend it if you have AEC collection users who are not level 2 users today. That's the subtlety of this, if you understand what I'm saying. So even if you have ArcGIS Online now, if your engineering department may not have level 2 access privileges on your portal, right? You may not have licenses for them. This allows you to add them to it for the trial period. We can talk about it offline.
And even beyond the trial period, I think you can still have those users, because they just have to be named users within your ESRI licensing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, we can talk about that situation offline. Yeah, sure. All right, okay. So let's just go through a very brief demo. I'm just going to give a very conceptual sort of video demo of how to get to ArcGIS Online. For some of you, this will not be very interesting. For some of you, it will be completely new. So we'll try to pace it appropriately. So, you know, one thing I did here that is somewhat important is the, you know, you have your own organization. This is going to be provided to you on the ArcGIS. If you already have your own organization, there's no problem. You just use it. If you don't already have your own organization, you're going to be given one as part of that offer so that you can test it out on that site. And everything that I'm going to show here is something you'd be able to do with that site for your organization. And of course, you can use, you know, ArcGIS Online as well if you were to want to. But this is better for your own organizational data because you can keep it private. All the stuff on ArcGIS Online is more public for the most part. Oops, I did that. Okay, 1 second. How do I go back? Sorry. Best laid plans. How do I fast forward? Okay, so what I'm doing here, I'm logging in with my credentials. One thing that is not currently supported, if any of you have SSO single sign-on authentication. That is not working yet, but it's something that we're working on. So on the portal, there's a number of different tabs. One of the important ones is the gallery, where you just see all the data that you're using with its kind of preview images. And there are a number of different things. So certain data sets you can only download. Others are applications. In ArcGIS Online, there's a lot of different element types. There's actually dozens or hundreds of element types, some of which have associations with either applications or the ability to put into a map, or the ability to be put into a 3D scene, for example, and others are just tools. But even like the web app builder is a process for allowing you to build applications that is really, that's another topic, but it's excellent. So when I'm looking at the data, this is still in the portal. I'm just navigating around my area. I can see what data assets I've got, and I can add things to a map. So I can build a preview map here to see what my users will see when they go to pull in the data from into InfraWorks, right? So this is important if you're new. It's very easy platform to navigate. You just bring in data as you would normally. It's a very simple to use web mapping system. And then you can use these maps internally. So it's very straightforward to use. And you can see what we tried to do is to sort of imitate on the InfraWorks side some of the features of this preview panel, so that it looks as much as possible like the data you're going to get in InfraWorks. Okay, and this is just off-the-shelf ArcGIS Online. There's nothing, we didn't do anything special for this. This is just your site. Every one of you gets this when you get ArcGIS Online. All right, now if I could only, how do I fast forward it? Okay, I'm going to skip the rest of that. So, one of the things that you can do as well is put your data in there, and data of various types. So when you're a user, you go to your portal, and there's a content folder. I wish this could go faster. Arc. Sorry. Timing is off on this. It seems to be stuck. Okay. Sorry. In any case, the idea here, I'm going to sort of verbalize it because the video is just not cooperating with me for some reason. I'm not sure why, to be honest with you. It's stuck. Okay. So essentially, you see this content tab? On the content tab, that's where you get to add data. It's really incredibly easy. So for shapefiles, for a lot of other data, you just literally go there and you press the add button, you grab it, you put it up, and you sort of say who you're going to be able to use it with. And from there, anything you add up here will show up in your organizational structure when you're in the, there it is. Yeah, so you go to add an item from your computer, for example, and you just browse to it, you grab it, and you can grab pretty much anything. You can grab geodatabases, and you can synchronize those so you can make sure that they're up to date. You can grab shapefiles, you can grab pretty much any standard data source. Now, from some of the data sources, like image files themselves, you can add them, but you cannot access them from InfraWorks quite yet. There is a process to add it through what's called an image server that I'll try to describe in a couple of minutes. One of the things that's really important when you're adding data is to use a lot of descriptive information so that people can find it easily. Because there are often hundreds of data sources on your portal, and you want to use what are called tags to make them easy to find. So that people, when you see on the InfraWorks side you do searching, you can just go grab them and find them easily. And once you've done that, you add the data. It takes some time to process. So if any of you have used BIM 360, there's a sort of cooking process where the model that you've put up is turned into something that can be used on the web. The very same thing happens here on the ArcGIS side. So you have to wait for a little while for the model to be available, for the feature classes to be available, and then once it is, you can specify some additional information. And there we go. And there we see sort of the different kinds of things that you can do with it. You can, open it in a map, right, which we saw earlier. You can open it in a scene. You can publish it for, like, if you want to have a public WFS or WMS, for example. And, there's some things that I think are quite important. They really want you to try to edit information to make the item information as explicit as possible. They keep track of that, how much information you're providing on the data. The other thing is to make sure that you put licensing information if you're making some of the data public. I really recommend you do that. There's a little place where you can put license. Under what terms and conditions is this data usable? Always put that in if you're going to be sharing it with either other organizations or inside your with the public. All right, so now I want to do the InfraWorks part here. Now, that's not, no, videos are not cooperating with me at all. That is really frustrating. Well, they're going to be published on the site with in there. So what I had is I had the whole workflow through this, putting it up and then adding it in InfraWorks, and the video is just not cooperating. You do videos so that you don't have network performance problems, and then you're incompetent at using videos. So I apologize for that. All right, so there is a bit of an issue with imagery that I'm going to try to explain here. So, and this also gives you an idea of the fact that you can use ArcGIS Pro if you have licenses for that to publish your data. Many of you who already have ArcGIS Online know this, but this is a really important part. So if you have image services that you want people to be able to use through this, it's important that you create a geodatabase with a raster data set. And the geodatabase concept, for those of you who don't know it, it's fundamentally the sort of primary storage model for all of Esri data. And what they like to have is almost everything in there. Tools, geoprocessing tools go in there, raster data sets go in there, normal feature classes go in there of various different kinds, rich data models, and it's all organized in the geodatabase. You can have file geodatabases or, of course, enterprise geodatabases. This is a file geodatabase, which is really easy to create. So once I've done that, I use geoprocessing tools, which is a whole part of the course. Many of them are tied to the data that you're using. But you use a geoprocessing tool to create the image. And when we do this, you're going to see here, we're specifying a number of different properties. What we've done is we've created the raster image in the database. So that is now a raster data set in a file geodatabase. And once we have it in that source, we can then share it with the community as a web layer. And we're going to do that. And the portal folder is hidden because it's an image server location that's private. But essentially, you have to have that image server up and running. So that's one thing I want to really make clear. Like if you just publish an Mr. Sid image, even if it's properly georeferenced and it's all correct, you go through the whole vector, the whole tiling process and the scales that you want it to be visible at with ArcGIS Pro, tile it, push it up. It will not be usable in InfraWorks at this time. You have to have an image server to pull in raster images at this time. I think that's going to get fixed, but it could be a real source of frustration if you're just thinking, well, why can't I put my image up there, and you'll see it. It'll appear in your list of feature sources, but when you select it, you won't be able to use it. All right. Okay. So DWG files too, and this is one that I think is important conceptually to understand because what kind of data am I putting up there, right? So you can pull in DWG files from A360 Drive, for example, so I don't really need to do this. But some of you may have really, really large consolidated DWG files, like 20 meg, 30 meg, something like that. And you may treat them more like GIS data. There is a way to migrate that data from the DWG file to a file geodatabase, and from there to convert it into actual classified features, and from there to publish it to ArcGIS Online so that some people can use it. From an InfraWorks point of view, that may make a lot of sense. You absolutely cannot do that with Civil 3D DWG files. So if you want to share Civil 3D, the only way to do it is through file sharing. But also, you can consider using A360 Drive or something like that to access the data that you've got up there. So I apologize for some of the video problems I had. I hope Dan does not have some of the same problems. But I want to turn it over to Dan Campbell so that he can continue and show you what they've been able to do with this at the City of Vancouver. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. So now that Stephen has shown you under the hood, I'm going to essentially give you the road report from the test drive. So first of all, this is our current city InfraWorks model. It's, the city size is about 44 square miles, and we have about 104,000 buildings, about 140,000 street trees. It's a fairly large model. But I just wanted to provide some context to make you understand how where we're actually doing this work. So right now, this is our current tech profile that we have been a long time Autodesk shop. And it's been very opportune because we're just in the midst of a very major Esri implementation. So we have the chance right now, looking at this new relationship between the two companies, to try to kind of architect things so it works the best way possible. For the most part, our InfraWorks users have all been in planning, and the primary use has been review of development proposals in context, and some early use from engineering doing preliminary road design. But I really expect with the implementation of the Autodesk connector that the kind of growth of InfraWorks across the city will really begin to take off. So when I was thinking about how to actually represent ArcGIS Online as terms of a data source for InfraWorks, because right now we really have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the kinds of data that is supported in InfraWorks. InfraWorks is an amazing data aggregation environment. So initially I thought, yeah, why not just show it as a really big green arrow? Because there's a lot of data going in there. But really, that really wasn't sufficient. So I thought this was a better symbol to actually use, because really when I think a lot of the users realize the wealth of data that's actually out there in the ArcGIS Online environment, InfraWorks users will be drinking from the fire hose. It will actually, I hope, begin to change the way we actually do a lot of analysis and work at the city. Because, and this is kind of echoing what Stephen said before, one of the biggest problems right now when people are trying to do any kind of work is where is the data? And right now, unfortunately, this is usually how it works. It's on a network drive somewhere. So we send the link, and then somebody says, oh, I don't have access to that drive. And then we say, okay, we'll contact IT, we'll get it set up. People will not tolerate that anymore, because this is how people now search for data. This is the expectations of ease of use that people have when they want to find what they need. And when you do that initial search and you're in the Amazon environment, you want to be able to actually give a kind of quick perusal of what's available. Is that what I'm looking for? Maybe not quite that color. And when you finally made the selection, buy now with one click. That's the optimum experience. And really, what is being developed with the connector for InfraWorks is actually starting to mimic this to a certain extent. Because here we have the interface. Right up top here, we've got the search area, so you can search for your data. And when you've actually found what you want, one click, add to my design project. Isn't that an easier and more acceptable way of actually finding what you want? And as well, as you notice on the screen on the right, you do have the preview of the data, and you can actually go in and review some of the metadata. You'll know when the file was created, who created it, who's responsible for it. It gives you more confidence about the data. What I think is probably one of the most important things is how this can potentially address what I'm calling sort of domain blindness. Right now, it doesn't matter if you're an architect, a planner, a GIS technician, an engineer. We all have blinkers out of necessity trying to get the job done. It's not that we don't want to look at larger issues and more data. It's usually because we don't have the time, or if we really are interested, it's too hard to actually get at the data we need. And if you really think about it, when they're talking about some of the items in the keynote about, wouldn't it be great if we had more time to focus on the things that are important? Well, potentially, if you can get at the data more readily, maybe that will open up the opportunity to actually begin to look at larger data sets and more diverse data sets to actually begin to do some of this analysis. And this kind of blinkered view is not only related to the data, but to geography as well. Because here with this image of Vancouver, we do not exist in a vacuum, but it may well just almost be like a medieval map, because when you look at all these kind of surrounding municipalities, we don't have any data for them. And really, at a certain point, are these sort of the land beyond data? Is this where no data exists? And when so much of the work that we actually deal with, when you're thinking about sewer systems, road systems, these all pass through all these adjoining neighborhoods. We should be able to readily get at this data. And to give you an example of how frustrating this can be, this is an example from a few years ago. There was a new development proposal in the city on the south slopes, and people were concerned that it was going to block the views of the mountains. So they asked me, could I do some analysis to see what kind of impact that would be? And I said, sure, why not? I will do that. The only trouble was that this mountain was not in Vancouver. This mountain was not in British Columbia. This mountain wasn't even in Canada. Suddenly, I was being asked to model Mount Baker in Washington State, which was 121 miles away. It was a viable, important piece of analysis, and it took a lot of work to actually dig up this data to actually finish this off. Now, I expect with having the access to all the wealth of data that's available in something like ArcGIS Online, these kinds of exercises in the future will not have that same degree of frustration. The other aspect I really like about this is the power of serendipity. Sometimes we don't know what data is important until we actually find it. And when you think about some of the digital searching for data, it doesn't allow you the kind of power that's available in the more analog browsing in the library. Sort of walking past the shelves, your eyes pick up information, you think, that might be relevant. I hadn't considered that. And the connector in ArcGIS Online begin to actually provide some of that functionality. What I did here is I just put in the tag Vancouver and did a search for what data was available. And I could have filled screens and screens of this. And I don't know in advance, maybe this one piece of information would be something that would just make a substantial difference in terms of analysis for future development. Another aspect that is not immediately obvious that is a benefit to using the ArcGIS connector is dealing with schema. Because any of you who've worked with InfraWorks will realize it's great as long as you're working with, within the constraints of all the defined features. So if you bring in buildings, you can set the building heights, you can set the roof slope. But what if you've got a really rich data set? And say with our building footprints, we have information about developers, who the architect was, year of construction, number of bedrooms. If I want to expose that information in InfraWorks and be able to do analysis and visualization with it, I would have to go in there and edit the schema in the JSON file. Well, let me tell you, I am not very competent at editing a JSON file. What happens now is if I'm bringing in a data set from ArcGIS Online, like in this case, this is the city's sewer network. And here's the list of all the attributes. I think we've got 98 different attributes. I can just imagine myself sitting down there trying to define all these and set this up. I bring in this file from InfraWorks. All that schema is automatically populated in InfraWorks, and I'm able to do any kind of analysis on any one of those attributes that's needed. Really, really wonderful. As well, we're actually talking about actual ArcGIS data. No more of this generic shape. And shape files do have their problems. The 10-character limit means truncated column labels, and it's so nice to realize that what you're getting now is actual, pure, artisanal, small batch, pure Esri data. So it gives me a kind of confidence about it. As well, some of the tools within ArcGIS Online provide some options for us actually dealing with sensitive data. We have data sets like archaeological sites, contaminated soils, crime data that we want some users to be able to work with and other users not to be able to see at all. Within the Esri environment, ArcGIS Online, you can set up constraints with terms of what users can get access to this data. So as an InfraWorks user, you would not be able to see those data sets unless you're authorized to see them. The other aspect is, and this is something that has plagued us forever and ever, working with quality data. And I would imagine many of you have been in this situation. You're working on a deadline, and somebody says, we need to add the new data set about the zoning. And you think I know where that data set is. And you find a portable hard drive and you click on it. And you look at it and you think, I'm not sure if this is the most recent one. I'm not sure who edited it. But, I'll go, yeah, I'll put it in. That's when I hear my mother's voice saying, put that back, you don't know where it's been. And what we're actually getting with ArcGIS Online is kind of a way of beginning to actually determine, is this data I should be worried about? So in this case, what you can actually see is that this zoning was actually deprecated. Don't use this. It's great for historical purposes, but this is not the current data set. And continuing on with my mother's voice, it's just the same way. I can hear her saying, where are the good scissors? Just the same way, I want the authoritative data to work with. With ArcGIS Online, one of the tags that's actually available is the ability to set data as authoritative. So you have total confidence that this is the correct data set to be working with. The ability to refresh data is really, really wonderful because, as Stephen mentioned, you bring the data set in, you're working with it. If somebody else has updated it in ArcGIS Online, you can click the refresh button in InfraWorks and you're up to date again. And more importantly, for me, who has been challenged with file management over the years, I don't know how many of you have been struck with this message where you've set up a model in InfraWorks and you've accidentally, in terms of tidying up your files, moved the original data set elsewhere, and suddenly it says it can't find it. Well, if it's available in ArcGIS Online, you know that that file is always going to be available there, and the chance of you seeing this is negligible. And tags. I cannot stress how important it is to actually tag the data, because if there's anything that's a problem as you start to work with these kinds of data sets, is that if you do a query, too much data comes back initially with a certain set of tags. So if you're very precise in terms of tagging the data, there's a greater opportunity to people actually getting exactly what they need to be looking for. So for this example here, with our sewer network, you can see some of the tags that we've tagged it with: City of Vancouver, sewers, utility, etc. And we can certainly, I think this is really going to open up the ability, because I don't expect the City of Vancouver is unique in terms of publishing a lot of this kind of data out to ArcGIS Online. So I did a search just under the tags of city furniture, and this is what came back. So suddenly, if somebody said, I need to actually get a good model of the urban streetscape, I know that I can get litter containers, I can get our wayfinding signs, I can get our planter boxes, I can get our bike racks, all that in the precise locations, and then go ahead and actually assign a 3D model to these objects and quickly populate the model. This is what I did here with an area in the city where I've actually taken the point objects from ArcGIS Online, and then I modeled up actual City of Vancouver streetlights and banners in 3ds Max and created something that looks quite nice just with the good point data from ArcGIS Online. And it need not just be thinking about things so binary in terms of GIS data and kind of 3D photoreal visualization data. The two can mix very comfortably, and you sort of begin to enter sort of a hybrid halfway spot. So here, these are polygons representing development potential mixed in with actual kind of detailed BIM level models. So now we'll actually shift into some kind of real life examples. This is my really crude neo-brutalist building that it was totally inappropriate for the site, but I thought it was fun, so I created it, that we'll actually try to put into context. So we'll see if I'm any more successful with my videos. So what is happening here is that I need to actually add in some new zoning information to actually see what kind of development potential I can actually have for this site. So what you're seeing, the rectangle that you're actually seeing there is actually the extent of your existing model. So you know that's what my model is at the moment. And then up at the top here, these different areas show what you can actually use to define the query. You can use the extents of the model. You can digitize a bounding box. You can create a more detailed polygon object, or if you have an existing file, say, of a study area, you can import that and use that for the reference. Right now, I'm just going to be searching for zoning, and as Stephen mentioned, it really depends on, is it my content, is it content from my organization, the City of Vancouver, some groups within the city, or just data that's shared publicly across the entire world, essentially. So here we go under zoning, and I've picked my zoning polygon file. And it's really nice, you get this wonderful preview. Unfortunately, whatever themes that you may be set up in ArcGIS Online, that thematic information does not get passed through to InfraWorks. You would have to recreate a theme once that's brought in. But it's good representation, and then I can actually look at the kind of metadata. When was it last updated? Is it current? Wow, this looks like it was updated just before the conference. How surprising. And it's brought in. Now, I've brought this in as a coverage layer, so when it comes in, it's actually initially transparent, but I've got the tooltips popping up, just confirming that, yes, these are the proper zones that I'm seeing displayed. But to make it visually evident, what I will actually do is go over and actually create a feature theme based on the individual zoning definitions. So I go into the feature themes, define, give it a title of zoning, choose my data set, and I quickly discovered that putting together these videos, that most of the attributes were so large they were off the screen. So you'll have to trust me sometimes that we actually got the right attributes. So in this case, I want to expose the each individual zoning value. So it's, I think it's around 230 something of them. And adjust the transparency, and there we have it. It's a very quick and easy way of actually displaying the zoning from the ArcGIS Online data through the connector. Okay. But I'd like to take it the next step. And what I have actually done here is I've gone back with my zoning polygons and my building footprints And in ArcGIS Pro, I just did a spatial join and just said, if whatever building is in whatever zoning polygon, please inherit that zoning information so that each individual building will now have the zoning information. And I'll bring that information back into my model. So I think you're beginning to see that it is an incredibly simple process. Each time, it's just a question of defining the data you're looking for, clicking on the specific information, and making sure that you actually map it from the ArcGIS feature to the InfraWorks feature. And it's essentially context sensitive, so that for point objects, the equivalent point object features in InfraWorks are exposed. If they're coverage areas or point objects, the same things come to mind. So obviously, for buildings, which I'm showing here in the preview, I've chosen the building feature in InfraWorks because I want to be able to take advantage of the roof slopes and the building heights and such that are built directly into the schema. So I'll add that to the, once again, it's come in because there's no theming immediately attached to it as imported, but I'll do the same thing as I did with the coverage layer, actually go back and create a new feature theme, and this time, once again, I'll base the feature on zoning, but it will be based on each of the individual buildings. So I'm calling these zone buildings. And as you can see now, once I actually did that spatial join, suddenly the list of attributes available to me to work with has grown substantially, so it's actually dropping off the edge of the screen. I had to do it twice to try to find it. There we go. Oops. Just adjusting the transparency. And we have the feature theme. And as you can see, all the range of individual zoning attributes are exposed. So for this next one, I'm actually going to work with a point object set. So in this case, what I'm actually interested in is seeing, for my proposed development, is there any crime in the area that I should be concerned with in terms of the building design or building placements? I think, okay, what is this an area that I should be concerned about? So once again, connecting to ArcGIS Online. And I will search for Vancouver crime. Because if I just search for crime, I might get crime for the entire world, for that matter. So necessary of making sure you use the tags. And I get quite a bit of crime information pulled back. And once again, this is publicly shared data. We're not actually sharing out our crime data, so I'm not quite sure where this came from. But I'll trust it. And yes, it's a little scary. There seems to be a lot of crime points noted in there. But we'll see what happens. So, and in this case, I'm noting it as points of interest. And so it will come in, as you can see here, with the default symbol in InfraWorks with the item there. But that's kind of dull. It doesn't really speak crime to me. So I thought, maybe we should try something a little different and take advantage of kind of the power of InfraWorks to work with lots of different 3D model types and such. So I want to make this a little more crime-like. So I've actually changed the symbology here. I have it as another layer, just to speed things up. So I've got my little criminals here. So it's both scary and friendly at the same time. And as you can see, I've got the tooltips actually showing the kind of crimes there. And it really is really evident, don't park your car in this area.
So that's just overall crime?
Yes. Yeah, just reports of crime. I'm within a certain time period, I'm pretty certain.
You could narrow it on down to like assault and battery.
Yes, yeah, depending on what kind of attributes were available to you. So what I want to show next is the kind of, right up to this point, it's been very similar to the kind of data sets that normally you would work with in InfraWorks. But I wanted to try to get more of a really pure kind of GIS data set. So in this case, I wanted to look at some satellite imagery, because that's something we probably, in terms of development review, don't really think about. So I did a search based on the Landsat satellite for this part of the City of Vancouver. And I came back with an interesting list of kind of raster data sets. And the one I chose was based on atmospheric penetration, which I really can't explain it to you myself, but I know that blue is good. It sort of shows vitality of vegetation or vitality of growth. But I was kind of curious to see how that would look in this environment. So when you get to a raster data set, you have the option of either it as a ground imagery, or if you're going to use it, create terrain. But here you can have it. Obviously, it's not that sharp as it being a satellite image, but it's kind of interesting because it starts to show, what I'm curious about is the relationship between the blue areas and tree canopy areas or built areas. And it's kind of an interesting underlay. It gives you a different perspective on kind of how the city is actually represented. So there we are. And then I thought,
Quick question.
yes?
So you used one of the tags prime and the Landsat. Is there a list of all the different tags that the model has? Which of them are public and not?
If you clicked on the kind of the information about the data, you'd see most of those tags listed. Yeah. So now I thought what am I at? I thought what would be useful now is actually to add in some actual trees, city street trees, to see what kind of relationship there is between these two data sets. And this is an interesting data set in that it is specifically street trees, because within the city, street trees are managed during a completely different process than trees in parks. They're two completely different data sets. And it's that kind of subtleties that can sometimes throw you if you're doing kind of an analysis and building the model. But here we have a representation of all the street trees in the area, and I'm just bringing those in as the standard adaptive tree from InfraWorks, just to give you a quick sense. I wanted to get a sense of where those trees are in terms of relationship to the atmospheric penetration. And as I zoom in there, I think, okay, that's kind of interesting. But since all these rich attributes are being exposed from ArcGIS Online, I should do some theming based on them. So you can see all the different tree species here. So I did a theme based on the different tree species. And when you think about it, if you were to put the work in, rather than doing the theming here, if you had the correct type of tree models, you could then actually match the tree species to the tree model and actually even work out a script to do the different sizing of the trees in terms of age and such, because that information is there. But I thought what I could do now to make it a little more photoreal is just turn it down and pretend that rather than variety of species, this is just a different rich fall set of colors showing there. And finally, I wanted to actually just try a linear feature, because we haven't talked about roads at all. And what becomes quite evident is that if you're bringing in any kind of a road network, the roads do not come in as component roads. You have to, once they're within InfraWorks, actually do a conversion if you want to have component roads. And let me just check. Oh, no, I was showing something completely different here. This is about the refresh. I'm actually bringing in the original study area that I was talking about here. So here we have our study area. This is the original group. As Stephen mentioned, you can go ahead and if the data set changes, you can get a new refresh view of this. What I actually did here is that I thought, well, that's great, but so often within the city environment, we're actually tracking change. What do I do here? So what I've actually done is I've taken the original study area, created a proposal saying this is the original study area, so that when I actually go back and do the refresh and get the new updated study area, I'll still have my original available to me. So it is not actually lost as part of the process. Because I just wanted to test it because I wasn't sure if the refresh would actually affect only the current master view or if it would actually change any of the proposals. So I was quite happy to see that anything I put in the proposal was just fine. So actually, what you're actually seeing now is I've gone into ArcGIS Online and I'm going ahead and actually editing the boundaries there because we're in the city. They said, you don't have enough money to do this big area. You're going to have to do it in this smaller area. And I do the refresh on the data tab. And there you have the new truncated smaller zoning area. Is it immediately after, and I did this I did this in ArcGIS Online, quickly came up and did the refresh, and it was available right away. And it's really exciting when you think about it that you could have people out in the field working with kind of some of the Esri mobile apps like Survey 123 and such, and actually editing data and doing a refresh and having it show up incrementally whenever you do a refresh actually in here. So now we'll see the final video of the street network. And what I want to actually show here as well is that I have the ability through this ArcGIS Online interface of only bringing in specific information. So actually, I selected a smaller bounding box, not the full extent of my model, and just to bring in those roads rather than all the roads. So you have that kind of very precise control about bringing in information. So that really makes file management much more pleasant. And so you can see that the roads have been cut off at the edges as I defined before bringing them in. And the only thing that I had to do is actually make sure that, change the settings to make sure the roads were draped so they display properly. And you're essentially good to go. So just as I had mentioned before, the linear objects have allow you to select the specific features in InfraWorks that are only related to the roads. And because I started up this with a automotive analogy. I decided to end it by driving off into the sunset here. So obviously to do that, I had to convert the road to a component road and then go into the storyboard and select the drive-through from component road. Come on, Dan, you're not fast enough. There we go. And that ends the presentation. Yeah.